All right, so now we're going to take an oil sample of our compressor here. In our kit, you'll get an information sheet that you'll need to fill out with the pertinent information about the customer as well as the machine. So we want to have that set aside. Also in the kit, you will get an oil sample bottle. When filling this up, make sure you fill it up to the fill line. And we want to cut a piece of clean oil sample tubing that can reach to the center of the oil level. So we'll remove our oil fill cap. We will insert our tubing. And we will pull out an oil sample. Again, being sure to fill up to the fill line. Then we will take our oil sample along with our information sheet that we filled out earlier and place it in the supplied bag to be shipped to the oil analysis lab. We're going to reinstall our oil fill cap. And get the unit ready to place back in service. Doosan recommends taking shock pulse measurements when you take your oil samples. We want to make sure that we get readings from both the male and female rotor and from the drive and non-drive side. Please be sure to get the correct measurement for your make and model air end. The drive rotor will always be in line with the main rotor. We also want to make sure that our machine is fully loaded and at max RPM for our measurements. I'll demonstrate here on this machine with it off. So this would be our non-drive male rotor. This would be our non-drive female rotor. This would be our drive side female rotor and our drive side male rotor. And be sure to record these measurements in your service log. So now we're going to blow out the cooler. We have an access panel here with 4 screws that we can remove and gain access to our cooler. Always want to make sure that we use clean, dry, compressed air and not to get too close to the fins that we fold them or bend any of them inside. And then we just tighten up the screws. So now we're getting ready to grease the main motor. We've already removed the rear cover, which is held on by 4 bolts, and we've already removed the guard for the coupler area so we can get access to our grease drain plugs. You'll find one of these on the bottom of the machine as well as one on the bearing cap cover. We want to remove those plugs and clean any of the old dried grease from that area. We also want to be sure to clean any grease off of the Zerk fittings before we fill with fresh grease. So we have our calibrated grease gun, and we're going to reference our operations manual for the proper amount of grease for each bearing. Once we've filled with grease, we'll go ahead and reassemble the machine and get it ready for service. All right, we've got our new air filter here, so we're going to change out the old one. So we've got 3 clips holding on the cover. We're going to pop those. We're going to remove the cover, take out the old filter, and we're going to slide in the new one. And then we're going to reinstall the cover. All right, we're going to remove the oil filter and replace it with a new one now. So we're going to take our strap wrench, get this old one loosened up, give it a second to drain any oil that may be in it. We'll put that in our bucket. We're going to take our new one. We're going to put a thin film of oil on the O-ring, and we're going to install it. Just hand tight. There we go. Now we're going to remove the separator element from our separator tank. To do this, we're going to remove our air discharge line, as well as our scavenger sight glass and our scavenger line, our control lines, and these bolts that hold the lid on. But first, we want to make sure that we relieve any stored pressure in our discharge line here with our manual blowdown valve. Start with there. We've got 2 bolts that hold on our discharge line. I'll set that out of the way. Next, we've got our scavenger line. And our sight glass viewer. So we'll get the last bolt out here and we'll get the lid removed. Get the old separator out. Want to make sure we clean the gasket surfaces really well to get rid of any old gasket material. On both the separator tank and the lid. On your new separator, you'll notice some grounding rivets in the gasket. That's to dissipate any static charge that may build up between the separator tank and the separator element, and the gasket and grounding rivets are on both sides of the separator element. And the installation is just a reverse of the removal. So we'll get our bolts installed, and you can check your manual for the proper torque sequence and specs for your machine. Now that we got our lid bolted down and all torqued, we're going to reinstall our control lines. Now we're going to reinstall our scavenger line. And our scavenger line viewer. This is a serviceable item, and be sure to check your maintenance manual for the proper service intervals for your machine. And now we're going to install our air discharge line. And be sure to close your manual blow-off valve. All right, we've got the doors off our compressor here. We're going to take the roof off to give us a little more access inside. There's 4 bolts that hold it on. We'll get the last one out and get it out of here. All right, so we have our compressor up to temperature now. It's been locked out. All the energy sources have been isolated and de-energized. We've verified our separator tank has 0 pressure in it. So we're gonna go ahead and drain this oil. We're gonna start by removing the plug to the drain on the bottom. And we're gonna go ahead and vent the tank to let the oil out. Now at this point, we would just open this ball valve and drain the oil out into an appropriate container and dispose of properly. Now that we got the oil drained from our separator tank and we've replaced the oil drain plug, we're going to go ahead and fill it up with fresh oil. We're going to start by removing the oil fill cap. Be sure to consult your operation manual for the proper level for your machine. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall the oil fill cap. And we're going to tighten her up. There we go. So now to replace the thermostat, we're going to start by removing the snap ring. We also have some pig mats down on the bottom to catch any oil that may leak out. Once the snap ring removed, we can use a 6mm coarse thread bolt to remove the cap. After remove the cap, we can remove the old element and install a new one. And a little tech tip here, that if you get this one cold, it'll help slide in a little easier for you. And then after you've installed the new element, it's just the reverse, reinstalling the cap and the snap ring. and make sure your snap ring is set in the groove. So here we have our inlet valve service kit. Inside the kit, we'll get a new cap and piston along with some grease to make sure that we lubricate the O-rings. So to service the inlet valve, we start by removing the cap. Reach in and remove the piston. We'll get our new cap and piston, being sure to grease the O-rings, and then reinstall the assembly back in the inlet valve. And that's how we service our inlet valve.